Last week on Sailing Adrift.
Today, we're going to get going on our propane locker installation.
And just like that, that's how you break your drill bit.
Damn. We also showed you our new gimbaled stove.
That is interesting. Well, after 2.5 hours of adjustments, I think I finally got the alternator in place where it seems pretty darn square. I just read time and time again that having your alternator as precise as possible with relation to the sheaves from the engine block and the sheaves on the alternator, having them, on the same plane, just makes a huge difference in belt life and all sorts of things. I wanted to make sure I got it as good as I possibly could. Obviously, I've never really done anything like this before, so let's see how the results look. Here's the pretty new alternator, 250 amp beast. I was using this straight edge right along the back side of the pulley to line up with that pulley there. And honestly, it looks really great. Taking the straight edge from pulley to pulley, we got a pretty good line. It's right off the back of this one. It seems fairly perpendicular all the way down. It's definitely at least parallel with the side, if not on the perfect plane. It might just be the tiniest bit aft of the engine pulley. But we're talking like a fraction of an inch or smaller. Well, I guess you can't get smaller than a fraction of an inch. One more thing I can check off the list. This engine room has just been kind of like a hodgepodge of what I can do now, what I need to order, getting that in.
For example,
the stupid high pressure pump is in. It's got good tension on the belts. They seem to be in good alignment. Man, that was freaking difficult. I do not want to do that again. I started off with bolts of the wrong thread size, so that was a big stopping point, but it took me, 2 hours and 47 minutes from start to finish to bolt that in place. And that didn't even count fabricating the holes. I did that the other day. So my God, at least everything looks good. I'm happy with the results. I hope everything's in good alignment and the belts work well. So that's step one of the Watermaker.
Oh yeah, that's what we're up to this week, building a Watermaker.
The big thing I'm running into is the stupid hoses. They are expensive. To get one 8-foot hose and one 4-foot hose, which is what I think I need, with the proper stainless steel fittings, $1,000, man. That's a lot for a couple of hoses. So I'm on the lookout for other options. The way I have it set up is I'm getting potable water with 3/16 stainless steel fittings. I think that's about the best you can get, and that's probably a lot to do with why it's so expensive. But I'm now contemplating other options because I'd like to spend about half that max.
As am I. And this is one of 47 reasons why boat projects take forever.
We'll see, but it's dark. It's time to call it a night. Back at it in the morning. There's lots of stuff here.
Yeah.
And some things as well.
Good thing you're big and strong.
No.
Hose for days.
We got this hose in, and the company I ordered this, I will not say out loud because I'm about to bash them a little bit. Minor bash.
We can bash people.
In fittings are stainless steel, but these are hydraulic hoses, and all the forums that I read said, don't use hydraulic hoses. Those aren't safe for potable water.
Why not?
I don't know.
Do they leach like
I
chemicals?
don't know. I am not a hose chemistry expert.
Okay.
But
yeah, put your mouth
it's like
on
a high tire, right? Well, that's the same thing as getting it up in the water. It's going to taste just like that. They are going through a reverse osmosis process, which would take out all that stuff. But I guess hydraulic hose is fine for it. If you look on their website, they don't have this type of hose. They show this beautiful blue hose. And this is like whatever version of whatever. Anyway, we're going to use them because we have them. Trying to get the potable water hoses locally was a disaster. It was super expensive, but everybody's blaming the fittings. And these have the same 3/16 stainless steel fittings that we want on this hose. So whatever, it'll work.
Okay.
Let's go install a Watermaker. One that I have bastardized the original that came with the boat and completely redesigned. We're gonna put together the rest of the kit today. And it is a kit that I Frankensteined with a bunch of other pieces that I wanted to install. Shall we?
Yeah.
I need you to carry this box. What do we have here? Oh, that's a tasty looking hose. What?
Look at all these parts.
Yeah?
We got our work cut out for us.
We do. Luckily, we're just executing a plan. That's going to be the plate. Once we get those designed, we'll go have them powder coated.
That looks expensive. Oh, let's just follow the diagram here on the top.
Yep, that is actually our kitchen. This is the stove. This is where the fridges live. These are two utility things, and this is the drain next to the sink. We'll be working primarily over in this area.
Oh.
We're going to get into the details of what we're doing in a little bit, but essentially how you make water is you suck it in from the ocean, you shove it through It simplifies things. It makes it so we have way less parts. We have several things that we aren't going to use because we're going to go this route. And I never even thought of this as an option until I was on a forum and someone told me to try it. So I will. Well, hopefully it'll work. So let's get into it. Let's start installing things. But first, before we do that, let's go over the whole system, shall we?
Didn't we just do that?
No, we're going to do the slides now.
Oh.
That was my segue into the slides.
Right.
Hello friends, and welcome to another educational slideshow. Today we're going to talk about water makers, but we should start by discussing what a water maker actually is. It doesn't actually make water. What it does is takes all the salt and bad stuff out of the ocean water so we can drink it and use it to flush the toilet and other things. There are three main types of water makers. You have a DC-based water maker, which is fairly easy on a boat's electrical system, but doesn't produce a lot of output. You can do an AC system, which requires an inverter and a generator. That one can produce a lot of water, but it is a bit taxing on a boat's electrical system and batteries. The third option, which is the way we're going, is a belt-driven water maker. Let's start with the intake. Because we're using the engine to produce water, that means the engine will have to be running while we're making water, which means we can use the engine's raw water pump for both cooling the engine and producing water. So we're going to go through the same through hole into the existing sea strainer that exists on the boat already and tee into the water as it enters the engine. This is awesome because the pumps on an engine are actually extremely robust, very reliable, and we won't have to have another working part that requires electricity to operate. So we tee right into that and go up into our water panel where we'll direct the water into our system. But before we go into the tee, we want to make sure we're not letting water back into the engine. And so we are going to use a backflow preventer, which has the added benefit of restricting the flow, which is actually a good thing in this application. So that goes from the tee off the engine into our valve and heads down using a 3/4 inch PEX pipe into our pre-filters. We're going to use two pre-filters, a 20 micron filter and a 5 micron. Because we're using filters, we'll obviously have to change them. So to know when to change them, we're going to, before we get into the filter, add a pressure gauge. That pressure gauge will tell us, once it starts to rise, that it's time to either clean or change those filters. Then, once we're done with the filters, we need to go into our high pressure pump. That takes our 3/4 inch PEX supply and turbocharges it, which requires a very specific, strong hose that's going to be able to be under pressure. The hoses we bought can withstand up to 3,000 psi of pressure, but we're not going to get anywhere close to that. So they're more than strong enough to manage the high pressure that we'll be using. From that high pressure hose, we're going to go into the heart of the system. That is the reverse osmosis membrane. It is in a fiberglass housing, and it is a membrane that allows water to permeate it, but not salt. There you go. We've made fresh water by pushing the water through the membrane, but not letting the salt pass through. So obviously we're going to have two different discharges when it comes to our reverse osmosis setup. One will be our fresh water production. We'll take that up into a flow meter that'll tell us how much water we're producing. Hopefully we're shooting for about 40 gallons per hour, but we would be happy with anything in the high 20s, and 40 is actually kind of a pipe dream, and if we ever hit that level of production, I'll be impressed. So from the flow meter, we're going to go into a Y valve. Why a Y valve? Because we need to test things before we start sending it to our tanks so we don't contaminate our water supply, but more on that later. Let's talk about the not so good stuff that's going to come out of the reverse osmosis, the super salty water. Let me remind you, these are also in those high pressure hoses, and that's going to go up into our panel that's attached to a pressure gauge and a pressure nozzle. The pressure nozzle uses a needle that only allows a very small amount of water to flow through the system, thus maintaining pressure. You can raise it and lower it by twisting a nozzle, and you can view what pressures you're at with the gauge that we have installed on the system. We are shooting for 800 psi for water production, and we don't want to exceed 1000 psi. Once the water bypasses the pressure regulator, now it's no longer under pressure, and we're just going to take it from that regulator into a Y valve. Why another Y valve? Why do we have 3 of them? For this one, we want to be able to exhaust it overboard into the ocean. While we're making water, we're just going to eject that overboard, but we would like to be able to capture the flush water that we'll use to clean the system out at the end for things like washing the deck. So we went ahead and installed a Y valve to be able to collect that water in a bucket and use it for purposes that you wouldn't consider potable. But we left ourselves hanging when it came to the water production. When we left off, we were talking about how we were going to run our 1/4-inch PEX line into the flow meter to see how much water is being produced, and then take it to a Y valve. That Y valve will either go to our test spigot, which will allow us to test for something called parts per million. The World Health Organization has an acceptable range for parts per million in water to consider it good or great fresh drinking water. We obviously want to make sure that ours is producing great fresh drinking water, and we want to be able to taste test it once it passes that parts per million test to make sure there's no salt in the water. Otherwise, we might send some nasty, gross water into our tanks, which is no bueno. Once we decide that that water is delicious, we're going to divert it into our tanks and begin to fill up our water tanks. And that's the heart of the system. We are now producing water, and it might take us an hour, it might take us 3 hours. The key to Watermaker health is running this thing often. So we're going to want to run our Watermaker at least every 3 days once we've opened the membrane and installed it. If you aren't going to use it, you can do a process called pickling, which we aren't going to cover. But what we do want to cover is what you do at the end of the cycle once you're done producing water. Because once you're done producing water, now you've got a bunch of salty bits in your system, and you don't want to leave it like that because salt is extremely corrosive. So what we want to do is we're going to erase what's going on in our panel right now and talk a little bit about the end of the process where we're going to do a freshwater flush. And this is where the first Y valve comes into play. We already have on board a freshwater pump, which is taking the water from our tanks and supplying it to all the faucets in the boat. We are going to use that fresh water, that most of which is probably fresh off of the Watermaker, to do the flush at the end of the system. But if you get water from municipal sources, or you buy it from the store, it might contain small amounts of chlorine, and chlorine does not go well with reverse osmosis membranes. So we have to make sure we're going to get that out completely. And to do that, we already have on board a fancy charcoal filter that we're going to use for our personal drinking water. So we're going to tap into that supply for flushing the system. So we'll go from our freshwater tanks into our charcoal filter, and then from there we have to use a shutoff valve because that will constantly be under pressure, and if we left this without a shutoff valve and turned off the system, it would constantly be flushing it out, which would be a big waste of water, which starts the whole flush process through our main intake that will be diverted from the engine to now taking fresh water from the system. That will go through our 2 filters and rinse them out, into our high pressure pump and rinse that out, and into our reverse osmosis membrane and flush all of that out. And then, like we spoke about before, we can divert that into a bucket and use it to wash down the deck, or maybe wash some dishes, or do some laundry, or take a shower. We wouldn't want to drink that water, but it's pretty much used for any other freshwater application. And there you have it. That is our reverse osmosis system. But first we need to install it.
And we're back on, live.
So that's how the system's going to work, right? Pretty simple, but badass. The fact that you can do this is pretty neato. So hopefully it works. Are you ready? Let's do it.
I'm ready.
Let's put it in.
As seen earlier, Chris installed the alternator and the pump.
After many trials and tribulations, both of those things, many of each, really, here is where our pump lives. It's got its belts on it, and it basically has this magnetic clutch, so you're not constantly spinning this thing for no reason. When you are using the Watermaker, we'll flip a switch, it'll engage this magnetic clutch, 2 magnets will stick to each other and start spinning our wheel. Actually, the wheel is always going to spin, but it'll start spinning the guts of the pump. So it's crazy. This thing has just got one wire because it's grounded to the engine already. So you just bring power to it and it takes care of the rest, I hope. But this was actually very difficult to install. The belts are nice and tight. I'm pretty happy with it. The first thing we need to do is hook up the hoses to this unit. And that's not as easy as I made it sound. So what we're gonna do is right about here, we're gonna put a T in the unit. And that is going to make it so we can run water down and underneath and get it over to this, which will be our command center for all the devices.
And that is easily accessible.
It's easily accessible in relation to other boat things, yes.
Yeah.
So I'd like the panel to be somewhere over here. This will be like the secondary command post. Of course, on the other side of this is our propane locker, so we'll have to like, where do we want to put this thing? Do we want it low, down like this, gangsta, and you sit here and control it? Or do you want it up at a reasonable, awkward height?
Seems a lot easier to install if you put it down low.
Well, that is one of the benefits, is the fact that if it's low,
Also, if you need to work on it.
the
at
hose
some point.
length is shorter.
Yeah. Does that work?
So this would work.
I like
just
that.
over the top of this. I don't hate it either. Well, this will be our working plan because we will be able to change this later. So, step one is taking the hose here and getting it up to this panel. We got to tee into the water inlet of the engine. There's a piece that lived right over here to keep it clean,
So clean.
and this will tie in to this. I think we should do it right here. Just to make sure, would you pop outside and grab the black hose? The reason we want to use this heavy duty stuff is because it goes directly from the ocean without the shutoff valve short of the water inlet. Plus it'll go above the water line when it gets up to where we're taking it.
Is that your new favorite spot?
No, it pushes on my belly.
Oh, I think that looks good. Your form is excellent.
Okay, yeah, I think this works for me.
Okay,
Right off the pump.
perfect.
A little loosey-goosey.
So far, so good.
So then here's the scary part.
Okay,
You're gonna cut into the hose.
you're gonna cut into it? This
Yeah, you
is the
gotta
T?
Put the T in.
Okay. So are you gonna cut all the way through? Or is that?
Well, yeah, the T's gotta go there.
I don't know how it works.
Well, follow along, you'll see.
Follow the journey. Oh,
There, circumcised.
there we go. That's what I was going for.
Next step, applying the T+2 goo. And sourcing the proper clamp.
Oh yeah, just dump them out like that.
This one's-
So why the double clamps?
Well, you've got all this meat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And eventually these are gonna wear out, so you might as well use up the meat with clamps. The only time I single clamp it is when there's not enough meat to make them clamp tightly. But this has plenty.
And we're clamp rich.
Just like that, we have a nice double clamp. Okay, 2 out of 3. Last one.
Easy does it.
Okay. Done and done.
Sweet.
With step 1 of 67.
Okay, next step.
Next step, we need to bring that water back from this valve to this board over here so it can go through the filters.
Okay, so
So
we're gonna
we
need
need-
another hose, right?
We need, yeah, another hose and 2 of the canister filters.
It was at this point we got a little hitch in our giddy-up because we didn't have all the right parts yet. So here's a movie magic flash forward featuring our panel construction. But now we're back on track.
I dropped it and broke a piece.
Oh, shoot.
Or so we thought.
Hijo de pu- Well, damn. Good news is I have more of these.
That is good news. Now look, just moments later.
There it is. There's our panel.
Yep. Do you want a quick run through?
Yeah, hold it up. Showcase
Come
your
over
work
here.
of art.
It's like kind of set up perfectly right here. So based on our drawing, all the elements are here. We have, oh, I didn't realize this sticks out the side. Isn't that fantastic? How did I not notice that? We'll just leave it like this all the time. It'll always be on.
Okay.
I'm excited. This is the panel. You have your supply. It comes in through here. This will either take the supply from our fresh water coming through our, like basically drinking water, which is our water tanks going through our charcoal filter, and that we'll use to flush the whole system out. So right here, this is ocean water. Right here, this is either off or flushing the system with the fresh water based on this valve here. This valve is, right now, this is flushing the system, and this would be off. So both of them this way is in the off and safe position.
We'll get to explaining all these other doodads and what they do later in the episode.
Just like that.
Easy peasy.
So it's all in one. I made it so every bit of the controls end up on this panel, which was very important in the overall setup. Before I was contemplating having to get in the engine room and flipping valves and stupid crap like this, I don't have to do that. What do you think?
Let us know what you think in the comments below.
I'm gonna say it looks great, and you're gonna ridicule me.
That's because it doesn't look great yet. Let's say this looks functional.
This is a great concept. I
Yeah.
love it. It needs some work.
Yeah, I
But-
marked all the things, but my next step is to kind of disassemble what I can disassemble, mask off what I can't, and then we're going to give this a coat of primer and then paint.
Cool.
And then later we'll use better marking for all of this stuff.
Right, because those labels suck.
All right, I'm going to go measure for the cutout next, and then we'll cut the hole for this here panel.
Great.
And we'll start hooking the hoses up in the back. You want to see the back of it? Because it's
Yeah,
pretty
I want to see that
complicated.
mess. Whoa!
Here's the connections for all this stuff. I mean, there you
And
go.
nothing runs into each other.
Well, not yet. We'll see. Look how close these guys are. They're buds.
Yeah.
That one was a little bit of a challenge. I'm glad I didn't accidentally cut into this when I was cutting that hole. I was trying to make this as functional while with a mind on aesthetic. And I think function really won out when it comes to this thing because the layout is not attractive to me. But I've seen worse things.
A short while later, Chris had the panel painted, installed, and ready for hookup.
There! One Watermaker.
Done?
Pretty much. I know how it works.
Well, if there
built and
were
installed.
labels on this thing, I
There
would
will
know.
be someday. I actually printed out a test paper so we can test font size and
Oh,
all sorts of things.
how
So,
creative.
how about that?
How about that? Don't push me over. This is scary. Walk us through the Watermaker.
Okay, we're naming this Watermaker the Tantalus.
Why?
Because Tantalus was a Greek king who was a bit of a hedonistic fella.
Mm-hmm.
He liked to eat a lot and drink a lot and do a lot of bad things to people.
Sounds
he was not
like
a nice
your
man.
typical Greek king. Really?
And then I think, then he ended up in hell, Hades.
Okay.
This might all be wrong. I'm just going by what I
I thought
remember.
Hades
kind
was a
of.
person.
Hades is the ruler of hell,
Okay.
but then there's like Hades' lair, which is hell.
Oh, right.
So he ended up there, and his punishment for all of time was being just out, like he was in water up to his chin, and he had food hanging up here that he just couldn't reach with his fist. Every time he tried to get a bite of food, it would draw back, and every time he tried to get down and get a drink of water, it would recede, and he perpetually was hungry and thirsty, surrounded by water and food without being able to eat or drink it. The reason we call ours Tantalus is because we're going to be surrounded by all this water that we cannot drink, but the Tantalus will rectify that situation. We take engine water. Oh, we've already seen the diagram. I won't go through all that and bore you.
Or will he?
We're just gonna quickly go through the system.
Drop it low.
Here we go.
Okay, ready.
I teed into the engine's water system right here, and that comes up and down and goes through a one-way valve into our panel, which is controlled by this knob.
Which knob? There's so many
I'll
knobs.
show you. Hold on. I
Okay.
just added water
Oh,
from the bilge. Oh God, there's more. It's in this plastic bag that I pulled out of the bilge.
gross.
So here's the panel.
Okay.
We painted it this nice gray color, put some pinstriping, and we're gonna label everything. This controls the source of the inflow water. If you go like this, that will put it in either the off position or the flush position, depending on this valve here. This opens and closes the flusher. So like this, everything's off. Like this, the flusher is now on and flowing through the system. So with the fresh flush water that goes through our filter, and when we go like this, the source is from the sea. This right here represents off. This would be flush. And this would be ready for water production. Then it goes down into our two filters here.
Does the engine have to be on every time you operate this?
Yes.
Okay.
Because the pump is operated by the pulley on the engine. Okay, so it goes to our two filters here. This is where its next stop is. And up here at the top of this fitting, you'll see this little line that comes off there. That actually goes to the right pressure gauge.
Okay.
Back there, that'll tell us, you know, oh, it's time to change your filters. We'll mark it when it's normal, and if it goes above that, it means the filters are getting blocked and not as much water is going through. You see, it raises the pressure. And then that goes down through the PEX pipe, right around through here, and ends up in the high pressure pump. That high pressure pump pressures the water high. And then it goes out the back. You can kind of see it on the top there, that stainless steel fitting. That goes down under and along here and ends up right here and pops out right here.
Would you look at that?
This will attach to our membrane. The housing is back here for testing, but obviously we don't want to open the membrane until we're ready to start making water, so I didn't install it. Then that produces two different things. It produces super salty water that's under high pressure, which will be attached to this hose, and not salty at all water that's under low pressure, which will go into this hose.
Nice.
This hose will go up to the panel and enter the panel right here.
Whoa.
This is our flow meter, so it'll tell us how much water per gallons per hour we're producing. Then it goes from there into this three-way valve. This three-way valve either sends it to this testing, and we'll just stick a little hose in there and we'll be able to test the parts per million and taste it to make sure that the water's top notch.
What if
And
it
then-
sucks?
Then we don't want to put it in our tank.
Okay.
But when we do want to put it in our tank, we just go like that. It sends the flow to the tank. The high pressure hose, the one that comes out of the back, it goes into this guy. This is our pressure sensor. So basically what we do is that pump pushes the water super hard and pushes it this way, and this is the restrictor. This is like your finger in the dam right here. And you can ease the finger in the dam and let more water through, or you can really tighten it down, and then you'll want to adjust it to the pressure here. We want to keep it around 800 psi. So anyway, this would control that valve, and you can open it all the way up and just basically use that for flushing. So that's the production, and then once we're sending that to the tank, we're obviously producing some extra salty water, and that is controlled by this. And this would either flow to this pipe, so it would just shoot the extra salty water against this wall, or we could put a hose on it, which is what
That's
we
a
would
good
do.
idea.
Or it would go overboard. And the only reason we'd ever want to keep this water is if it's the flush water, and why waste 5 gallons of fresh water on a sailboat in the middle of the ocean? I thought that was a terrible idea, so I put this valve in there so we could bypass it and have 5 gallons of fresh water-ish that you wouldn't want to drink, but you'd absolutely wash dishes with it, you could wash the deck down with it, you could take a shower with it. You know, it's just kind of like not worth drinking, but virtually fresh water. After everything is said and done, want to flush the system out, as I mentioned. So what you would do in that case is you would bypass this to close, turn off the system first. You don't need the high pressure hose for this, but the engine would still need to be on. And then you'd open up this valve, and what that's going to do is allow water from our tanks that has gone through this final filter. And this final filter is the one that has a charcoal filter, and this is actually what our drinking water will filter through anytime we use the drinking water faucet. Watermaker membranes don't like chlorine at all. So if there's any water or chlorine in your drinking water from filling up at a municipal source or on an island in the South Pacific or whatever, if there's any chlorine at all, it'll destroy your membrane. So we want to make sure we're flushing it through this guy, which will remove chlorine before we use it to flush out the system. Got it?
Got it.
So that's it.
And 67 easy steps.
In theory, this is going to be an awesome water maker, but we won't know what it's going to do until it goes into the actual river, or ocean so we can test the system. So I just hope it works. We really don't have a way of confirming that for at least a few months. So
Jury's out.
oh, we also didn't talk about the electrical component. So they make a bunch of different high pressure pumps. The reason why we went with this model is because we have a big engine. We're going to use it to have to charge batteries on occasion, so we might as well use it to make water. At the same time, it uses the same amount of energy roughly. So this is a belt-driven water maker. Down here are pulleys that spin anytime the engine's on, and right here are pulleys that operate this pump. And the way this thing works is it has an electrical connection right here that operates a magnet. So when the engine's on and we're not making water, this thing just free spins and it doesn't hurt anything. It's not making the pump work or anything like that. But when the engine is on and we engage this by using this super cool doomsday switch,
Satisfying.
yeah, then the magnet engages and this starts making the pump work. So it uses very little DC energy in the system and it's driven by the belt. I also installed this. This is a little hour meter, so the power comes in and it does nothing. No power gets to this unless this switch turns on, and then it goes from here into here, and this just tracks the hours that the system runs. So we'll know how many hours are on the Watermaker. We can figure out, oh, you know, it's been, I checked my logs, we changed the filter at 1,000 hours, it's 1,200 hours, it's time to change the filters, that type of thing.
And you can reset that.
No, you can't.
Oh, okay.
It's like an engine's one, so you can't reset it.
That was
I'm sure
like
they
every
make
1,000
resettable
hours
ones.
we could reset it.
Yeah.
Just keep
You
logs.
can't. And this hole, this is a very important hole. If you decide that you want your switch, your kill switch, over here instead of here, then you move it
You have that option.
and you leave this hole behind.
That's nice.
Do you want to see the back of the panel? It's very complicated.
Sure, why don't you
Yeah.
show the back of that?
Sure. 1/4 inch internal hose for all the supplies, all the fittings on that. And then we used the 3/4 inch for the supply and 1/2 inch for the flush water. All in white, so any white hose in the boat has to do with this Watermaker setup. So if you would like to own your own Tantalus, call 1-800-DIP. I know the guy who made it, and these things are not proven at all. It might not work, it might sink your boat. Stay tuned.
Sink your boat.
It's possible. It's connected to a through hole in the ocean.
Hey you, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw and you want to keep following along, become a subscriber. Just hit that subscribe button below. And special thanks to our patron crew. We really appreciate your support.
I was about to hand you this box.
Well, now you can't because I'm holding a camera.
Yeah.
Psych. Nice hair.
Thank you. I feel like I'm trying to be concise. Do I need to say that first part over again?
No, we don't even probably need to include that first part. Because that's
Then
not
why
even
you
what
let
we're
me
doing.
talk?
I like to hear your voice.
Well, Kelly, when it's windy outside, you go, ooh. It's a thing. Give you RST, LNE.
What?
Oh, that goes right up the old keister.
Yeah, it does.
Kelly's gonna walk us through the Watermaker.
I don't need to walk you through anything.
Yeah, the jury's out. It's this hole, Kelly. Why did you have me put that hole in it?
I didn't.